Well, it may not be Festivus, but here we commence to air our grievances. After back-to-back 25-point losses, Indiana basketball is in the gutter, the proverbial gutter, and there's a lot to talk about. I'm Ian Plaskoff. He's Austin Platt. Welcome back to the House of Hoosier, presented by the Field of 68 Podcast Network. And Austin, I don't even want to start by talking about the game itself. I want to talk about the atmosphere inside Assembly Hall because boy, oh boy, was that not good.
Yeah, boo. I don't want to talk about this either. No, but we have to. That's just the way it is. And just bad atmosphere all around. I mean, the students, I get it, 7 o'clock start. People are getting out of class. It's the first week, fine. But just the energy to start the game wasn't great. The team started okay in the first 10 minutes or so. It wasn't a complete blowout, but it was a double digit deficit. And then once the fans did get in, they all started booing and they all got up and left at halftime. So it was a pretty the display was shown by the fans and their words and what it was directed at because let's be honest, Indiana hit rock bottom in that terrible loss to Illinois after a bad loss to Iowa as well. So it just you're piling on bad losses to after what was a good stretch of 5 straight wins with better basketball, but now it's back to square one.
I was heavily debating. I didn't have a student ticket to go to the game, and I was like, do I want to buy a ticket to go? And I decided against it, and I'm very happy that I did because I was able to stay home. I still watched the whole game because that's what I do. But I was able to put on the Pacers in the background. While they lost, it wasn't as bad. And that's kind of the point that I've reached of Indiana basketball. It's kind of like, do I really want to spend my time during the school week, go all the way across campus and go to a basketball game that I have a good feeling isn't going to go too well? Even though I said I was going to be optimistic, as soon as I saw that Kasparis Jakučionis was playing, that all went down the drain. So, you know, it is definitely a low point. And is there anything that Indiana can immediately do about that? I don't know. But I'm not the kind of person that gets pessimistic and like, oh, I don't really even really want to go to the game because they're so bad. Like I would still go to IU football games when they were 2-10, 3-9. But I've just kind of reached the point that, hey, I've got other things that are more important than Indiana basketball right now, and I'm not going to make room for Indiana basketball to take over in that spot, which is not something that I'm used to.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, Ian. It's less anger, and I've, said, a variety of things the last few years that, I'm mad, and that's because I believed in those teams. This team I just don't believe in, and it's sad. It's not even like an anger. It's more of sad that IU basketball in your life and in my life too is taking a back seat. Like this year, I mean, for various reasons, I didn't buy the student ticket package. I was like, all right, like. I'm not going to go to enough men's games. I'll work enough of them, like I was last night, to the point where, all right, I won't buy the tickets. And last night, sitting there, and I was all the way in the back, I was just laughing. Like when Ivasic hit that deep three, practically from Champagne, it's just like all you can do is laugh, and that's just the way the game went. The scuffle at the end. Obviously it's embarrassing, but it's just sad to where Indiana basketball has gone really in I don't even say like in 10 days because 10 days ago is when we're recording this is when Indiana won at the Palestra and it's just complete 180. It's just a complete nosedive since then. But really since the last 2 years when they were building up and Trace got the team at least back to a respectable level and nobody has upheld that standard. And this team from this year is supposed to be better than the one we saw 2 years ago. Ian, it's leaps and bounds worse than that team. It's not even close. And we're saying this when Indiana was playing four out. They were playing one big. They were playing the style of basketball we wanted to see. And last night, Illinois is a very good team, won a really, really good team. They're arguably better than their team was last year, and they're so darn young, which is incredible. And they do the right things. They out rebounded Indiana. The effort is the worst part about it. I mean, the clip everyone has seen is the 3-on-1 that kind of goes astray for Illinois, and Balos just taps the ball, and then it's just watching the play unfold. It's just like a 2K play where it ends up in a layup. It just looks like a third grade basketball game where no one's trying and someone throws up a shot and it goes in. It's sad. It's as simple as that. And really, no one wants to take accountability other than like a couple of players we saw last night. And it's just, it's here we go again, gloom and doom. And the fan base is used to it, and now they're sick of it. But it's sad where IU basketball has really fallen in the last 2 years. Is what I'm going to put it as.
I will continue the airing of grievances with my thoughts on a bit of the X's and O's here. Okay. I noticed this in Iowa. I've noticed this throughout the entire tenure of Mike Woodson, is that, well, we talked about this in the preview too. When Indiana gives up 10-0 runs or runs of really any kind and they get down by enough, they just start going through the motions. There's no fight back. And I mean, you saw Illinois, the first 4 minutes was still dominant by Illinois, but Indiana was at least hanging in there. It was like a 4 point game, 6 point game, whatever. Then Illinois goes on this run, and then all of a sudden Illinois has 17 second chance points 13 minutes into the game. Like that's the definition of lack of effort, lack of care on the offensive glass. Indiana got out rebounded 51-37. 51 rebounds to a team that really isn't that tall against a team that is meant out to be this physical presence that rebounds the ball, plays strong defense, whatever. 16 offensive rebounds, and again, 13 of those or 17 of those, whatever, 17 second chance points in 13 minutes, whatever it was. It was terrible. And the coaching staff just did not get up and do anything like they did in Iowa City when they were down by 30 there. And it was just kind of going through the motions the rest of the game. I think that's why you saw fans booing. I think that's why you saw the fight at the end because players were just fed up. That was a frustration fight. It was as clear as day as a frustration fight. And just the effort and the energy is just not there. And that all comes from the coaching staff. That comes from the players, the culture, and none of it seems to be there. And you can tell by this Indiana crowd, the students were chanting fireworks and the crowd was booing. Even like the season ticket holders and all the older fans that are loyal to this program, whatever it is, they were booing too. And to have that go on at your home arena, I get if it's the road fans like at Carver Hawkeye, that's what happened there. But to have however many people it was, like 14,000 at home, booing you off the court multiple times throughout the game, that should tell you something. And that's just it just like you said, Austin, it's not necessarily that I'm mad. I'm the same way. I'm just sad to see that that's where the program is at.
Yeah, it's been the lack of accountability too. I mean, Trace Jackson Davis solved so many of Indiana's problems. He was a great leader in the locker room. He didn't deal with all the crap that was going on, and there were a lot of teammates that he had well over the course of many years, but just with the two of Mike Woodson that dealt with some off-court stuff, and he wasn't having any of that. And he guided the Indiana team to two NCAA appearances. Gave them a decent shot to win the Big Ten in his last year. And Indiana just hasn't had that. They don't have anywhere close to that. And there's no nucleus to this team. The leaders are Luke Goody and Anthony Leal. And they do their damn best, and I feel bad for those two more than anybody else, and it's not even really close. Mainly because those guys have grew up in Indiana and play their butts off every time they're on the court. But there's no nucleus. There's no identity to this team, and there hasn't been an identity. Last year there wasn't really an identity either. Clearware was good, but didn't solve all the problems clearly because that team was terrible. And this year it's the same way. And these guys, this is a $5 million roster, and you're paying million. You're in the top three, whatever. One of the top teams that Indiana is one of the top teams that spent in terms of spending money in the offseason. They're right up there. And this is the product that the fans are getting. And they deserve to be booed. It's as simple as that. The people are like, well, you don't boo. You have to. There's no doubt about it. Indiana fans know what good basketball looks like, and all they want to do is just see good basketball. And even if that does not mean a win every night, they just want to see their team go out there and play well. There have been a ton of home losses the past 2 years. Now, just this year, this was the first home loss, but I mean, last year there were a bunch of home losses. Indiana didn't get booed every time. I mean, if they played close, fine. Then okay, that team. Well, the roster last year was just not built right. This one is built much better, and you're down by 30 points to Illinois in the first half. You give up 60 points in the first half. You're down by 28, Ian. When's the last time IU football was down by 28? Like, it's a laughing matter at this point. Literally, I don't even know the last time IU football was down by 28 at half. They give up 60 points. Sure, they started the second half better, just that's because of the intensity. They matched Illinois' energy. And I can tell you what, the two of us could go out there pretty easily when you're up 60 to whatever, 60 to 32 at the start of the second half. You can think about whatever you want to think about. You know, what you're going to eat afterwards, what you're going to listen to on the bus ride back to Champaign. There's a lot of things you can think about when you're up by 28 at the half. And it's embarrassing. And we sit here and we do this every single time. And yet players are going to call on the fans to root for them. Luke Goody's saying, the fans who are booing, stay on that side when we turn things around. Booing Trey Galloway off the floor, you did not play well. Last night against Illinois. Booing him is not a great look. He's a captain. He came back for another year. Very well could have A, transferred, B, taken it to the next level, whatever, basketball, otherwise. That's not a great look, but I mean, the fans are fed up. They know what good basketball is like. That's all they want to see, and they have not gotten that in 4 years of Mike Woodson. They didn't get that a ton with Archie Miller, and they got a little bit of that with Tom Crean. But I mean, it's Indiana fans are sick of it, and you cannot blame them for these kind of performances. You have to blame the coaching staff, and the fact that the coaching staff doesn't want to do anything about it is telling. I mean, Mike Woodson didn't even do his usual radio thing last night with Don Fisher, which I don't know how big of a deal that is, but I mean, I feel like there have been losses where there have been other times where you don't have to do it, or it's better not to do it. It's in his contract. It's not a big thing in the grand scheme of things, just because not every coach does it, and other coaches have done it in the past at IU. But it's just not a good look. I mean, he took it like half an hour to get in the presser. Said whatever he said, and then Leland Goody came in immediately after. It's just a terrible look for this program, and now players are, talking about it on social media. Just leave that alone. It's not the way to do it. I mean, you're fueling the fire to the haters, and we don't even have to say it. We're not going to say it. Those people don't even deserve their names to be mentioned, but they know who they are, and they're getting what they want because they're getting the publicity, and you're just feeding the beast. Don't do that.
I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning of what you said and talk about the $5 million roster and the lack of product, whatever that may be. This team looks like exactly what it was constructed to be. Without coaching, let's just say, for the purpose of this point, you go out and you spend $5 million on players, on individual players that are old and more experienced in the college game and trying to make a name for themselves in a bigger place. These players come in, play on the same roster, and yet it feels like they're just playing by themselves. There's no connection with anybody on this team. That's why you don't see an identity. And that makes sense because you see $1 million contract for a guy like Ballo, for a guy like Rice, Kane and Carlisle. There is so much iso ball and just individual forward play forward, not in the position, but in the centric method of the play style. In that you see no ball movement other than entering maybe once a possession down low. You see minimal ball movement. You see terrible shot selection. You see lots of dribbling, lots of ISO ball. The defensive end, there's no connection. It's just ISOs on all five players. That's what this roster is built. It stems from that because you bring in all these players, you pay them a lot of money and tell them, hey, we need you individually to be big for us. They come here, they expect to do that, but they don't expect to do that in the context of being part of a team. And that's where the coaching comes in, and that's what we haven't seen. There's no culture that connects all of these new players in. That's why it's not a sustainable model. You can pay $5 million all you want, but if these guys can't play together, it's not going to matter. So the individual play is leading to all these issues. It's leading to the lack of culture in this program. It's leading to the bad play on the court, the lack of relation to the fans, to the media, whatever it may be. And I think it all stems from how this roster is constructed, not in terms of who, but in terms of how.
Yeah, I'm right with you. The construction was there. This is the team that was picked to win the Big Ten. And we sit here, middle of January, they're 4-3 in the conference, and they're staring right into the barrel of what is it like The next 8 to 9 games are quad ones. Everyone said it was 11 straight. UCLA dropped out of the top 30, so they're not technically a quad one game at the moment since it's a home game. But regardless, I mean, you look at the next however number of games it is. I mean, it's like where does Indiana like we could go back to the whole confidence game we had playing road games. We could do that for home games. Like I just for games like this, like if Indiana goes down by 10, you're like it's over. They're not coming back to win. And there are teams that are good enough. This team is good enough to stay in games, but just the energy just drops completely. There's no energy on the bench. The coaching staff gives off no energy. The only energy the fans give is negative because that's how ticked off they are. Um, it's it's sad. It's disappointing. It's all the above. And I mean, just guys aren't taking the right shots. Like the past two games, Indiana went back to the older IU basketball from early on in the season. Not taking enough threes, taking up shots way too early in the shot clock, not getting the passes down low, forcing up shots. And we see this even in that 5 game winning streak. But just like the 3 pointers at Iowa, Indiana did not take enough threes to win that game, knowing Iowa is going to make a ton of threes at home. And that's kind of what happened. I don't even know what the numbers were. Iowa hit 45% of threes. Holy smokes. Okay, it really was a lot. They hit 11 threes. That's pretty darn good. That's Iowa basketball for you at home, and Indiana took 16 threes. They only made 4 of them, but 16 is not enough when you know the other team is going to get over 30 points, around 30 points in just their threes alone. And even against Illinois, Indiana's not taking the right shots. The guys who are shooting the threes are not the right guys. Indiana took 18 threes against Illinois. 7 of them were by Trey Galloway. He's not the volume 3 point shooter, and we've known this for last year. You know, the year before, came off the bench. Obviously, had to play a starting role once Xavier Johnson went down. But a low volume shooter, he shot the ball pretty well. He cannot be taking 7 threes. I know he just wanted to see one go in the second half. He was just throwing them up there, which is okay. But I mean, Goody takes 4, and Baco only takes 3. He's been so inconsistent, 1 of 10. He's just jacking up mid-range shots. Bryson Tucker in 17 minutes had 4 points, 2 of 4. He creates his own shots. Some of them fall. Carlisle has not found his groove at all this year. It's sad. There's no two ways about it. Indiana, they don't have an identity, and the last 2 games Indiana went back to the old. Not enough threes, bad shots, no connection whatsoever. There were times they ran sets for Umar Ballo against Illinois, but then yet again you're giving up a 3 on the other side of the floor, and you're running a play for Umar Ballo, who clearly was tired. I mean, Illinois is obviously a very big team. Along the fact that they're pretty darn good, they're big. I mean, Ivasic was hitting threes from all over the place, so Ballo had to play out, which obviously he can't do. He has to be in drop coverage. Um, but overall, you're not getting the right guy shots. Way too early in the shot clock, you're taking them. Like you can get a good shot, with 10 seconds left, and it can be a 3 for somebody, and you can live with that even if they miss. But don't just be taking shots 8 seconds in just because Illinois is on a big run. And Indiana has been such a streaky team this year with the runs. They've had a bunch, but other times they just haven't. They've been giving up big runs, and that's what cost them in games. And the Iowa game is a great example. The first half, there were 3 12+0 runs. Iowa had 2 of them, and Indiana had one sandwiched in there, and they had the lead with like 7 minutes left in that first half. Like it was exciting. They were doing the right things, getting stops. Then it just all falls apart after halftime. Like one run for an opponent just kills Indiana. There's nothing they can do about it because they don't have enough offense.
I'm going to focus on 2 guys in particular. One guy in who was supposed to be, an NBA draft, you know, prospect and the leader of this team offensively. The other guy who was paid probably a pretty good amount of money to come in. The first is Mackenzie Mbako. Mackenzie Mbako, since the Penn State game, has shot 3 for 24 from the field and 0 for 11 from three.
Wow. Holy
It,
smokes.
it is, he's like a non-factor, almost a negative factor in the offense because he just kind of takes random shots and stops possessions. And then Kanan Carlisle, who has been getting a significant number of minutes for the way that he's been playing recently, looking at his season totals, he is from the field shooting 27 for 98. That's 27.6% from the field. From three, he is shooting 12 for 53, 22.6%. That is not necessarily what you want from your 6 man off the bench. especially when you put him out there in a lineup that doesn't really have enough offensive capability in it, like what Indiana tends to do with its bench lineups. And then you add the starters not playing well. I mean, Galloway has been just not great at all in the past two games. Um, Mbako, not great. Ballo has been pretty fairly consistent on the good side for Indiana. Luke Goody's been doing whatever he can do. Anthony Leal's put in some good minutes. I'm going to give guys credit that deserve credit because Miles Rice as well has been one of the more consistent players for Indiana as well. But then that's what, four guys, and one of them is a major contributor in Ballo every game, maybe Rice as well, so two. But then you just look at the rest of the team, and there's just not much going on. And you really can't beat a Big Ten team, especially in quad one, when you're playing like that. I mean, Indiana's 1-5 in quad one games, and all five losses have been by 15 or more points, I believe. So it's a real problem. Now, can it be fixed? Yes, there's plenty of season left, but it's a consistent problem that happens across years in this program. And that is the big concern.
It's also just the body language with some of these guys. Like, I get it. Not every player plays with flair. You don't necessarily, know what's going on in their heads, like what they're thinking, how they feel. Not everyone exudes the same energy. But I mean, Mackenzie Mbako looks like he's like sleepwalking half the time. He's like a robot. Doesn't show any emotion. Good night, bad night, whatever it is. He's almost like he's playing in a game of his own, a league of his own, a mind of its own, whatever. I mean, he's just like sometimes on a completely different planet than everybody else. He just takes his own shots, does his thing, and he doesn't even look like he's part of the team sometimes. Ballo, not as easy for him, obviously, to move up and down. He's shown some energy this year, some good energy, and he knows he's had to play a bigger role. And let's give him his flowers. He's done it about as well as possible, albeit he completely lost his nerve last on Tuesday, and everyone knows that. 16 points and 15 rebounds in 34 minutes against Illinois. Not an easy task, not an easy matchup for him. It's fine. It's a pretty good stat line, all things considered. Sure, he had four fouls, but only one turnover, four offensive rebounds as well, 11 defensive boards, 2 for 4 at the line, made 7 of 11 shots. He was pretty good, all things considered. But even so, there's just the energy, the effort on nights where he's not having a good night. You can tell the body language is so obvious with these guys, even with Galloway. He's a captain. You'd have no idea Trey Galloway's a captain. Rice a little bit. Okay, Rice last night when Goody, that late foul. And then Ivasic, sticks his head into Goody, kind of little boys him, which was ridiculous knowing the score. Rice showed some emotion. He got in there and picked up a tech and shoved the big man out of the way. That's fine. There's some energy. But I mean, Galloway just does not exude that. There's no energy from him whatsoever. 3 of 11 last night, 2 of 7 from beyond the arc. 10 points in 26 minutes. He's getting booed off the floor, and he won't do anything, it feels like, to change that. And that's just the way it is right now with Indiana. Their leaders are not showing the same energy, and their leaders right now are Luke Goody and Anthony Leal. And the Leal at 22 minutes had 6 points. Obviously he'll play 20 minutes a night because he had to. He had to come in the game and at least try to provide something defensively. But just the energy and the body language, even from the bench, is just so down. It's so lame, and that's, I think, the biggest thing that the fans are mad about is the coaching staff doesn't do anything about it. Woody just sits there. He left Ballo in last night when he could have taken him out to, embarrass him. Let's leave these guys out there and, show them what it's like to get stuffed in a locker. Well, that's happened way too much. How about you get the guys off the floor so you don't have a brawl happen like we practically saw when, Ballo runs over and shoves Ivasic out of the way. He's not going to get suspended. He didn't throw a punch like people thought at first, but it's way too much. It's crossing the line. And at one point, could we just say, get everyone out and throw everyone on the bench and see what they can do? Because Ja'Kai Newton's someone I like to see a little bit more considering his injury. He played 4 minutes last night. I picked up a rebound, also turned the ball over as well. Let's see some Langdon Hatton. We don't know how long Renew is out for. Like, let's clear the bench. Let's be smart here and let's just not sit on our hands and let the game play out, because at that point, Robbie Hummel said it. Can we get this game over with? Like, the officials took way too long to review that, and before anything worse happens, let's just all exit. We'll all wave to each other, bye bye, no handshake line, get off the floor and focus, because there's the two big road games coming up. You can completely change the season around if you win them both.
Yeah, I was a big proponent of getting bench guys in. I'm gonna, as we continue to Give guys flowers that deserve flowers. Shawn Burke. Shawn Burke is always up on the bench, giving he always stands up for every made basket. He's clapping, he's cheering his teammates on. I will give credit to Shawn Burke because I think he deserves it. Now, what does that say about this program if one of the main and only guys I'm giving credit to is a walk-on? That may not be the greatest thing. But Shawn Burke, credit to you. Um, I would have liked to see guys pulled. I really would have. I do think it was because Mike Woodson didn't want to lose any kind of further than he's already lost any respect from people just because if he took his guys out before Underwood took his guys out, that would have been a bad look. Whatever, gamesmanship, I get it. Because Underwood also didn't want to do the same thing to Woodson. Um, there's, a little bit of a rivalry between the two. Um, but it was all gamesmanship. But sometimes, if you want to get a message across to your team, you're going to have to forfeit a little bit of gamesmanship to get something to hit home with your players because they certainly need it. After back-to-back 25-point losses, but back-to-back losses where you're down by 20 plus in the first half, down by 30 plus in the second half, um, and one at home, which is just embarrassing. This was a game that was one that was said that this could turn Indiana's season around. Like this is a big game. This is a ranked opponent, a winnable game at home, as some people thought. Um, but as it seems now, Indiana doesn't really have a home crowd because the home crowd is rooting against them. Except when Indiana opens up the first or the second half on an 8-0 run and it's like they just won the NCAA tournament, which I thought was hilarious. Um, but there's just again, you got to get something to hit home to your players. You got to get to your leaders. You got to get to your secondary leaders. You got to get to just everybody. Like I guess something hit home with Shawn Burke because he was really the one of the only guys that stood out. Um, just some cultural shift has to change because culture, a lot of people don't really think it, but I do. I think that culture wins games.
Mike Woodson, if he took his guys out, that's not only showing respect to the other team, that's showing some respect to yourself and be like, all right, you guys had our number tonight. I'll take our guys out. You guys got us. We'll throw the bench in and we'll tip our cap and essentially wave the white flag. But I mean, not even doing that, like you completely lose your own respect just because, it's like it's almost like you're keeping it out there because you think it's working and clearly it's not. But he doesn't want to do anything about it. He hasn't done anything about anything really. I mean, he punishes Umar Bala for going out the night before a game, and that's the biggest thing that he's done is, all right, I'm going to punish you for what you do off the floor. When you're not on my watch.
I will say though, that wasn't like we still don't know. It would have been nice to know, hey, Umar Ballo did this, he's in trouble, that's why we're benching him. But there was no clarity. They called it a questionable leg injury, whatever it was. So they're still trying to kind of hide the discipline in the program, which I didn't like. I would have liked some clarity there. Because again, you never want to leave Indiana basketball fans up to speculation. But that's just what I had to say. So yeah, continue.
Yeah, but I mean, he suspended five guys, for at Northwestern for, that was before the game, and there was nobody on the injury report. We knew an hour before when he went on the pregame show with Don Fisher. Oh well, it's going to be a different night tonight because not a lot of guys are going to play, and now everyone, oh, what did they do? And obviously, he completely buried it under the rug. So when you do it once, I'm under the interpretation where fine, I can assume whatever I want, and when there's pictures out there, that's enough evidence for me. But you're right, he was on the injury report fine, whatever. It's easy to throw someone as questionable on the injury report. There's no consequences to doing that, whether he plays or not. But Mike Woodson has never punished guys for what they do on the floor. He never changes the starting lineup. He obviously has to now with Malik Renew out, and he did when Galloway was back up 100% up to speed. After a few games, obviously had that leg injury as I kicked my trash can over. That's pretty fitting, actually. But he never punishes guys. Like Xavier Johnson had the terrible guy ejected last year at Rutgers for nailing, I think it was Antoine Woolfolk below the belt. Indiana fans, some of them called, hey, suspend him, bench him, like do something. Woodson didn't do anything. He got Ball last night completely going over the line. And should he have been ejected? Probably. It wasn't 100%. It was a clear shove, and he had a running start. The other technical's fine. Take that for what it is. But I mean, you get guys getting suspended. Or rather ejected. There have been plenty of ejections in Mike Woodson's tenure. It's way more than anybody else. Even the flagrant fouls, the technical fouls. Woodson's only been tossed once himself. I mean, that was last year, I think, against Nebraska. It was the Big Ten tournament that last game, walking right into the sunset, where he just said, "Screw it, I've had enough with this team," and he walked out, exit stage left, and embarrassed himself and embarrassed the whole program. And he's embarrassing himself and the program by not taking accountability for guys that are doing things. And people have said it. You can't control what guys do off the court. You can only control what guys do on the court, and neither of them have been pretty. In Woodson's tenure, he only wants to do one, and he's not going to address the other.
Austin, you were there covering the game, correct?
I was there for class, yeah.
Okay, so I want you to take me and take everybody through the press conference and what that was like. You said it took Woodson 30 minutes to get in there, and Goody and Leal were there as well. But I've been to a couple Mike Woodson pressers myself, and there's not always a lot of direct answering. And I wasn't at this one in particular. I couldn't even go to the game. But I just want to hear what it was like um, from your perspective. You're muted.
I'm muted. I had to cough. Whoops. Uh, it was eerie just because, like, people we saw the notification that he wasn't on Don Fisher's post game. There was a game earlier this year against UNC Greensboro where he didn't even have players go up and talk, and Indiana won that game. Like plenty of other times where you could not have a player go, talk, not have players. He didn't do it after a win. So like, anything is open here. Like, what's going to happen? So after half an hour, the doors finally shut. We heard some commotion because the locker room is really adjacent to the media room. And he gets in there, and he answered the questions. He said everything he said. Yeah, I got a question about the fans booing him. Said, I love the fans, but it's up to me to get the team up to speed. So he didn't throw the fans under the bus. Um, but addressed it like it was. Said, he's got to review the Ballo tape and what happened with the incident and address it from there. And he said, obviously, Ballo's a big piece. But, yet again, mentioned, Malik Reneau being out. And Indiana could have used Reneau against Illinois. I know for the defensive issues that Reneau faces with the fouling and the lapses he has, like Indiana really could have used some size against the Illini. But, again, pointing to Reneau's injury, guys, pointing to, it takes some time to put the team together. Illinois had two players come back this year, and one of them redshirted out of nowhere. You got a bunch of European guys. AJ Red, I think, or DGL Gibbs Lawhorn is the Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is the only, I think, other returner technically on this team, and he played He played 16 minutes, had 12 points. Actually, had a pretty nice second half. But there are two returners, really one returner in this Illinois team, and look what they are. They are a top 10 team, arguably. I know they've had some tight losses. They had a chance to beat number one Tennessee on their home floor, but I mean, Woodson just keeps pointing to the same stuff, and it's like this day and age in college basketball, you can't point to those things all the time. Everyone's getting new teams. You lost to Louisville by 28 points, even though that game was like at 35 at one point. Louisville's got a completely different team as well. Like Indiana has some returners from last year, and Woodson's still pointing out the fact that, oh, we're a new team. I mean, people are sick of it, and you could tell just the mood there is completely changing. Everyone is now kind of seeing the bigger picture of what the road is currently leading to, and that is leading to Woodson not making it to a fifth year. If he makes it to the rest of the year at this rate, I know it would take a lot to get rid of him, considering that was a question last year, and last year's team was nowhere near the talent it is this year, although the results look sadly the same. And then when Leal and Goody get there, they both did a heck of a job answering the questions. They were straight up say, you know what, this is embarrassing. This is not the brand of IU basketball that we're used to. We gotta fix it. Man to man, man to self. Like look in the mirror. That's how we fix this program and fix this team. The biggest, your biggest critic is yourself, and it has to start with that. Everyone knows Ballo across the line. Good job stepping up for your teammate and picking up for him in that kind of situation, but. It was just kind of eerie last night. Like, oh, what's Woodson gonna say? Is he gonna like answer one question and leave? Like everything was on the table after last night. But I give credit to Leo and Goody for saying the right things, and got a little jab in the fans at there as well, which fine, go ahead, get it in at the end, considering that's a question that's going to be saved till the very end because that's not the priority in a situation like this. But the video that went viral is the one of the fans booing Mike Woodson. And from what I saw, like Illinois fans, like Kyle, who we had on, and thanks again to him for coming on, he said that's the loudest on the TV I've ever heard boos at halftime on the Peacock broadcast. Like that's how bad it was. And the Fire Mike Woodson chants were loud as well. They booed Mike Woodson when they announced his name before the game. Like it is getting worse and worse, and there is nothing the team is doing, at least Woodson is doing, to change any of this. But it was just eerie last night. Everyone looked around like, is he going to come in? Like we had no idea what was going to happen. He took like half an hour. Like we were waiting there for a while.
I was watching on the Peacock broadcast and I heard stuff throughout the game and I was waiting for that halftime walkout to the locker room and I knew it was going to be bad because I've watched this team for years, but I didn't think it was going to be that bad. I'm with there with Kyle and thinking that was probably the loudest boos of any fan base of anything on their home floor, even on the broadcast. So there's that. But I want to touch on a point you made about Woodson continually going to the phrase of, "Oh, we're still building this team together. They haven't played enough with each other." Um, because you look at how Indiana markets this program to recruits, and they market this program to be an NBA style program where you're going to get to the league uh, in like a year. Okay. So you're burning through all your top recruits in a year, and you've got to rebuild the team every year. College basketball is not won by having pro players that leave in a year because they're going to be freshmen and they're going to be not like they're not building blocks. College basketball is the mix of veteran guys mixed with talented freshmen, mixed with talented veterans, mixed with coaching. Indiana does not necessarily have that because they market their program to be, hey, you're going to be here for 1 year, you're going to play in an NBA style, you're going to boost your draft stock, you're going to get a lot of exposure, and then you're going to leave. That's what we saw with Jalen Hood-Schifino. That's why Mbako came here. I'm surprised he came back for his second year, to be honest with you. Um, Trace was the one lucky break that Indiana got there, was staying for 4 years and being an All-American in his senior year and an All Big Ten player. And you just don't see that nowadays. Like Ballo's going to be gone next year. Um, you'll see probably some guys transfer because they didn't get enough playing time or didn't play as well as they hoped or whatever. Um, the Bryson Tucker didn't, if he was better, he probably would have left after a year, but he didn't really live up to the expectations as he hasn't so far, at least. And then Indiana continues to go out and get these 4 and 5 star guys that expect to play for a year, win Big Ten Freshman of the Year, all freshman team, whatever, and then leave. And you can't build a program like that, especially if the reason why you keep losing, at least in your opinion, is because you're still building a new team. Like it's just, it clashes. It doesn't make sense that you run your program like that and then you blame that for all your problems.
It's difficult to balance nowadays in college basketball, like how to actually go about constructing a team because it's so easy just to build a team from the transfer portal. That's what a bunch of teams have done. Louisville did it. Illinois, okay, fine. Freshmen from Europe, I basically count those as transfers. They're transferring from one continent to the other. Um, but there's a way to build the team in 1 year, and then there's the way to build it up, and it's trying to find the happy medium. It's not easy. It's nearly impossible. Like Indiana recruited Gabe Cupps thinking he's a 4 year guy. He's gonna get his playing time his freshman year. He got a lot more playing time than he expected. Didn't perform to the expectations that Indiana fans probably set on him, or maybe Cupps even set on himself. And there's some other freshmen, Ja'Kai Newton injured. Like we can look at the roster from guys, let's see, CJ Gunn never panned out. Tamar Bates never panned out. Like these are guys you expect to be there for 2 or 3 years, if not more, and pan out to be, what they are on the computer rankings, the 4 or the 5 stars, whatever it is, what they are on paper. It just doesn't work out, and it didn't work out for a guy like Peyton Sparks, who won, Mac Player of the Year. Is supposed to be the big man behind Khalil Ware and play and be the backup. And whenever Ware is tired, he'll go in there and he'll do his job. He'll be great as a bench player. And who else? There's another guy. There's other guys who I'm missing, but the point still stands. Not everyone pans out to what they expect to be or what coaches and recruits expect them to play like. And you have to be wary of that at all times. And you have to be aware that you can't do this every year. You cannot be spending millions of dollars in NIL money just to bring guys in for 1 year, and either they graduate, they go to the draft, or they transfer. And it feels like at this rate, like that's what's going to happen to a lot of the guys. Like, and I'm not going to name who I think is going to transfer because I don't want to speculate. I don't like speculating during the season of who could leave and who not could leave. But I'm seeing rumors of guys that might leave in the middle of the season. And that's what we kind of thought about last year in March, like when McNeely decommitted, it's like, who's going to go next? Like, is Indiana going to bring anyone back from last year's roster? And thank God for NIL money because Indiana was able to do that. Like, it was a shock that both Renew and Ibaka stayed with the Cream and Crimson. That's just the way it is. I get it. It's hard to recruit. It's easy when you have a lot of NIL money, but it's hard to balance. Can we get guys for 1 year? And can we get guys that are going to be projects for 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years? Look at Illinois. They've done it. Like they're doing it. They're one of the youngest teams in the country, and they have not necessarily a top 25 roster coming into this year. They have a top 10, top 15 team, and that's with good coaching and figuring out a way to get the guys to mesh. And Indiana hasn't done that, and that's unacceptable.
I agree with you. I did not preface by saying it is extremely difficult to build a roster and do it correctly and find a balance between the 5-star 1 years and everybody else who, will stay for 2 years, maybe stay for 4 years, five, six, seven, whatever college athletics you can do now. I think Parker Fox is in year 8 at Minnesota or something
Yep.
like that. Um, but the just it's all about creating a sustainable product. And I think that NIL has become a shortcut that kind of diminishes what a sustainable product can and should be. I mean, you look at like the beauty of college basketball and the tournament in particular is that it really doesn't matter how big your school is because you know, you look at teams like Fairleigh Dickinson, you look at teams like St. Peter's, you look at teams like all these classic upset teams, Northern Iowa, you remember these teams for being, for the team itself and for the good basketball they played. You don't remember these teams for the players on them. And with the new age of NIL, it's all about the players. It's basically just free agency. It's not about the teams. You're seeing teams poach play like John L. Davis going to Arkansas. Like he was a star at at FAU. You look at AJ Storr going from a talented he was at Wisconsin, right? And something like that.
Yep.
Wisconsin, he
Yep.
was a 20 point per game scorer, goes to Illinois, he's averaging like 6 a game, but hey, he's making a lot of money, right? Like NIL it's so unregulated, it's so new and so like people just don't know where the limits are of it. And I think Indiana's fallen into that trap a little bit because they're using it as that shortcut to build good teams based off individual players and not necessarily the team and the culture because every player is going to bring their old culture, their old team, or even they'll just bring themselves and ignore all the cultures of the places that they've been in the past. And you look at these programs like Illinois, the one consistent thing about Illinois, no matter who they have on their team, no matter who they play, no matter how good they have the same culture. And Indiana just does not have the identity on the court. And really the only identity off the court has been, hey, we're trying to get back to the success of the Bob Knight era, and we're trying to build this program back up to its old standard, and we're just not getting there. And that's really the only culture and identity that Indiana has, and I think NIL has only made it more difficult.
I think we can dumb this down. Players nowadays go to play for the coaches and the money, but not each other. Like that's what it's all about nowadays. And that sucks. And that's why a lot of people like myself, when NIL was first, introduced and it all it's gonna happen, it's like, okay, there are going to be some positives out of this, like college athletes making money. That's a good thing. Like, not all of them are going to end up in the NBA. Not every college athlete is going to go be a pro. They have to figure out how to manage their money. But now it's just it's free agency with no cap. There's no limit whatsoever. And Indiana falls into that trap. We're desperate to do well. We've had down years. We got to bridge the gap between Bob Knight and the future, the past of winning and hardcore, playing for each other. Not playing for yourself. Team games, hard defense, the effort, the energy, all of that. That's all gone away. It's now all about myself. This is an I game. There's no I in team, but there is in Indiana, and that's the way it is at the moment. And I think that's the way college basketball, why it's going. I mean, let's talk. Let's face the facts. Tony Bennett stepped out. Jay Wright stepped out. These coaches are stepping out. These great coaches are saying, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And unfortunately, there are only more that are going to happen because of this, because you have to recruit essentially 365 days a year. And even when you're playing in a national championship, you got to be worried about, oh, did I make the right phone calls today? Do my assistants talk to the right people? This is the way it is. And now players are, 1 year, they're 4 years, they're trying four different schools. Like, this is not the way college athletics was built to be. And it's another sad thing that now it's just about, okay, where can I go for the most amount of money? Coleman Hawkins, let's take it this way. I mean, he was a integral part of Illinois' Elite Eight team last year. He's like, all right, I don't care where I go. I'm going to make a crap ton of money, and I'll go where the money is. And Kansas State went out to get him. Look at Kansas State. They're not doing too well this year either. I mean, they spent what, $5 million on him? I mean, they spent practically as much on one player that Indiana spent on their entire team. That's the way college athletics is nowadays, and it's a little different when you're, one of the best players in the portal. Fine, the amount of money that people are going to spend, it's going to increase. I mean, it's a supply versus demand thing. There are not many guys like Coleman Hawkins available in the transfer portal. He's such a different player, but that's just the way college athletics is. And you're right. Indiana falls right into the trap. Oh, we can spend money and completely, eliminate the past few years of failure, according to the fans. Mike Woodson was brought in not to, bridge the gap. You at least bridge the gap. He was brought in to hang another banner, to see another Big Ten championship. Indiana finished tied for second 2 years ago. They haven't even made it to the Big Ten championship. They've made it to the semis, what, twice. They have not made it to the Big Ten championship. They have not made it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. They are leaps and bounds away from what we expected them to be like when Mike Woodson was first introduced in the spring of 2021.
I'm going to go a couple routes down the football road like we seem to do every episode. The
Why
first
not?
thing is my analogy of the day. It's not really an analogy, but it's a comparison. And what is happening right now with Indiana and many other college programs is reminding me of what the Patriots did in the offseason about 4 years ago when they went out and spent record numbers of money in free agency and went like I don't know if they made the playoffs. Like and then they were trying to rebuild after losing Tom Brady. They tried to rebuild what they had with buying players, and there was really no culture because Belichick, kind of lost everything with Brady and Gronk out the window. Um, so that was one thing. And then the other thing is I'm going to look at the other side of this and where NIL can be positive and what needs to happen for it to be positive. In looking at Indiana football, like we do. Um, because Indiana football used lots of NIL money and they continue to use lots of NIL money. But the difference between that is and Indiana basketball is that they're combining the use of NIL money with culture and good coaching. Like it's a team game with Indiana football. It's the complete opposite with Indiana basketball. Even though they're doing the same thing, they're spending tons of money. The money is not acting the same, if that makes sense.
It's different, and obviously football. There's so many more players you need, and there's so much more. But I was thinking about this when you're talking about the experience and bringing in older guys. Like Kurt Cignetti's mentality was like output over age or something, or whatever it was. It was like I forget what it was. You know it?
Um, it was something over potential, progress over potential, something like that.
Productivity, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
It was like, all right, let's go out and let's recruit guys that have done well in the past, that have a winning culture, and guys that do their best individually, and that will also mesh together as a team. And it's easy for football, bringing over half the JMU staff and the players. That obviously is very easy. You have that built in. but your quarterback was from Ohio. You have other guys coming from other places. It's not easy to get these guys to mesh. It's not easy to get guys on a basketball team to mesh either, but some teams have figured it out. Indiana hasn't figured it out, and that's because of the coaching. And you're right, the recruiting is completely thrown off with this entire NIL. And there's only going to be more money poured into the program because the fans are investing and they're still showing up every single night. They're going to. Indiana fans are not going to stop showing up because their team is playing a bad brand of basketball. That's how much fans care. And when you show up for as well as IU does, and you can say whatever you want about the student section. Fine, cold is probably not the best excuse not to go, but it's a 7 o'clock tip. You never know what people and the students especially are doing that first week of classes. But I mean, fans are going to show up and they have every right to boo. They show up every single game and they show up and show out, as the intro video says. Um, the team has to respond, and the way IU is going about this, from you're right, from the portal, from recruiting, to what they're saying and the product, obviously foremost, the product they're putting on the court, all way below standard from what we said. From 2021 when Woodson was brought in, and now everyone is essentially on the same page that a lot of things have to change, or else the door is wide open and it says exit in all red lettering.
I'm going to take a quick look at where Indiana stands now, who they are surrounded by in these computer rankings, and then we will air our final grievances on this honorary Festivus Day of Indiana basketball. Okay, we're going to look at the kenpom first. And in the kenpom, Indiana is sitting at 58, 13, and 5, surrounded by teams of the like of UC Irvine, New Mexico, and North Texas, along with Big Ten teams in Northwestern. USC's a little bit down there at 63. Arizona State and Georgetown are in the mix there. Vanderbilt, Dayton, Xavier. That's the general area of where Indiana is in the KenPom. The net is not as favorable to Indiana as the KenPom. Indiana's at 64, sandwiched on right in between 62 and 63 of New Mexico and McNeese, and 65 and 66 of Drake and Santa Clara. So, you see a team like Indiana, you see that name in the context of college basketball. You think prestigious, you think a great history, you think a high standard of excellence. And then you see this team mixed up with teams like UC Irvine, McNeese, New Mexico, and Drake in the polls or in the computer rankings. How does that make you feel?
I laugh. That's all I do. All you can practically do is just laugh. I mean, McNeese lost like what, one or two games last year. I think they're in the NCAA tournament. I think they won their conference. They were like unstoppable.
McNeese is 10 and 5 and ranked above Indiana in the net.
I mean, even in KenPom, Northwestern's 1-4, I think, in Big Ten play. They're horrendous. They are not good. You expected them to have a down year after Boo Buie finally left. Um, but I mean, like UC Irvine, they've been good the past few years. In what is that, the Big West. I mean, New Mexico has been a great team in the Mountain West, but like Indiana should not be on the same line as these top mid-major teams, but that's what they are. Indiana, according to the metrics, is towards the bottom of the Big Ten. And Indiana is not they're not going to finish towards the bottom of the Big Ten. I still think they'll finish in the top half. I was looking at the schedule, even with all those tough matchups coming up. I think Indiana could still win 8, 9 games in the Big Ten. I mean, they already have four at the moment. They're 4-3, still not even at the halfway point of Big Ten play. But I mean, North Texas, Georgetown. I mean, that team was down in the dumps a few years ago. They're winning one Big East game. And obviously, Ed Cooley and all that. Obviously, he's made a big difference. But Arizona State, USC, Nevada, UC San Diego. I mean, it's just the teams that are around them. It's embarrassing. Like you have, true football schools that are around Indiana, and I guess now we can call Indiana a football school in this. But I mean, Santa Clara out of the West Coast. That's a team that's been in Gonzaga's shadow for a long time. UCF. The Indiana has dropped. Indiana has dropped off a cliff when it comes to the way other fan bases view them, and that's because of not just Mike Woodson. It's been other coaches. It's been a program issue for essentially a decade. Bob Knight left obviously around 2000, and since then it's just kind of been a complete train wreck. But some coaches have figured it out. Tom Crean figured it out for a few years, and that's like the brand of basketball that we were desperately looking for. And it's been Indiana's competed for Big Ten titles since Bob Knight left. Mike Woodson really has not, other than that 1 year when he had a chance and they beat Purdue on the road. Great, we have a chance to win the Big Ten. Next game, he gets smoked to Iowa at home. I mean, just the number of losses, blowout losses, it's embarrassing. But they were down 30 points in the first half against Illinois. That's all you need to know. This game was over with 6 minutes left in the first half. Like, that's how bad it was. And I mean, just looking at IU's schedule, the computer rankings are just even the final score is so not indicative of the way these games have gone. The first game, we can literally go through every single game. I'm not going to do that. I'm bored. I'm almost sick of talking about this team. I'm not. I'm just sad. But I mean, like Eastern Illinois, they won that game by 35 points. They were down one at halftime. Like you look at some of the other games, like that. What was it? The UNC Greensboro game where Woodson didn't have any players afterwards. They won that game by like 8, maybe 10 points. It was around double digits. 11. They were in control essentially for a good chunk of it, and then let UNCG back into it. And the under four timeout, the game was close. Same with South Carolina. Hoosiers control that game for the first 35 minutes. The last 5 minutes, it gets close. Like there's so many other games. Nebraska is the biggest one. Like that game was close for 35 minutes. The last 5 minutes, Indiana gets blown out and loses by 17. That was not a 17-point game. Everyone who watches that game understands that. The computer rankings are so off with this team because the way Indiana has played the games are not indicative of the final score. And most of the time, it has not favored Indiana. Like in the games Indiana has won, they win the games rather comfortably, but the score doesn't say that because they have a really bad 4 or 8 minute stretch. Like that Penn State game. Indiana's up by 16 with 11 minutes to go, and everyone's biting their nails at the end just because this team is not good enough for a full 40 minutes. That's why the computer rankings stink. Like Indiana's resume is not horrendous. Like we said this last year, right around this time. Like Indiana, their best win is definitely at Penn State. At Penn State in a 50-50 crowd, essentially. It was a little more pro Penn State, but at the Palestra is not really a true road game. It counts. It's a quad one win. That's clearly Indiana's best win of the year. Their worst loss, like you could pick any of them. Like I think that Illinois game, I think is the worst. Like true home game, you lose that by it could have been 30, it could have been 40 points for all we know. They were down 28 at half. Like that's all you need to know about. The fact that it was 25 points, great. They scored the first 8 points in the second half, fantastic. Anthony Leal or Galloway hit a garbage time three at the end, good for them. But the computer rankings are so skewed because the way IU has played has not translated to the final scores, and that's the real issue because the resume itself, like on paper, is not they're not there's I think there would be like a fringe tournament team at this point, like just the teams that they've played, their wins and their losses. That's not the way college basketball is. It's all computerized. You have to play to the computer rankings. Indiana's trying to play to the NIL game. They're not playing the computer rankings game, and now they're on the outside looking in, and everyone's bracketologies right now.
All right, one final thing before we air our final grievances is the upcoming slate. So Indiana's got two road games coming up, Ohio State and Northwestern, two teams that are not great in the Big Ten, but two games on the road. Okay. And then you have a home game versus Maryland on a Sunday, January 26th. And then you go 4 out of the 5 or 5 out of the 6 of the next games after that are ranked opponents. You have Purdue and Wisconsin on the road back to back. You have home versus Michigan, Michigan State on the road versus UCLA at home, and then versus Purdue at home. That is a tough stretch of
Yeah.
basketball. So you like if Indiana does not perform well in this game at Ohio State on Friday and the game at Northwestern next Wednesday, I'm going to have some real concerns because there's an absolute gauntlet after that if you don't make it through with like 1 or 2 wins out of that, probably two at this point, maybe even three, it's going to be an issue. So, yeah, you got to win the next at least 2 out of the next 3 with Ohio State, Northwestern, and Maryland.
We said this last year. There was a two-game stretch where Indiana went to Wisconsin and went to Illinois. I think both teams were ranked at the time. And this was, I think, right after that home loss to Penn State, which was by far the worst loss. Like, and that was the loss that Indiana was, kind of waiting to have like that one bad loss that everyone could pinpoint and say, okay, this is not a tournament team because of this loss right here, and none of the other games or none of the other wins are even close to this loss. Like Indiana's best win at Penn State, I would say is not as good as the negative of Tuesday night's Illinois game. I don't think it's even close. But regardless, a quad one win is a quad one win. Indiana could have completely changed their season around last year if they won at Wisconsin or at Illinois. And it stinks that I think Khalil Ware was out for both of those games. But regardless, you had a chance. The game was semi-close with like 8 minutes left against Wisconsin. Then the Badgers go on a huge run to end that game. Indiana had a legit shot to beat Illinois last year. That was a fantastic game. They didn't hit a single three the entire game, and we're in it with about a minute to go. Xavier Johnson was on the free throw line with like a minute left, down by two, chance to tie it. I think if he makes those free throws, I'm confident Indiana actually wins that game in a hostile environment. It's the same thing this year. You have these two games back to back after a really bad loss that is really kills the resume just because you hadn't lost at home yet. You win one of these next two, you can completely put your season back on track. You win two of the next three, and you beat Maryland at home. Maryland, I don't think is very good. See how they play away from home, but Derek Queen obviously could go off against a team that was thought to be the favorite to recruit him. Like, let's see what happens. But you have a chance to turn your season around, win two of the next three, and our mindset will completely shift. And I get it. We're Indiana fans. It can change at the snap of a finger our mindset of the team. I still don't think Mike Woodson's the answer. I've been under that impression for really since the trip to the Bahamas, but I'm still going to root for them, and I'm going to be realistic. Indiana still has a shot to make it to the NCAA tournament, to make some noise, and they're 4-3. They can still, finish in the top half of the Big Ten. Season is not over yet, but if you keep playing like the way you do, the effort against Illinois, this season's going to be over pretty quickly, and there'll be a lot of fans booing when Mike Woodson keeps getting introduced in these home games.
I'm right with you. If there's no changes made, you can't expect anything to happen differently on the court. Um, you know, I always I have this screenshot of an Albert Einstein quote that I like to put on Twitter for various situations, and this might be one of them. Is Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result is insanity. So if Indiana continues to do the same thing and expects to win at Ohio State, at Northwestern, at Purdue, at Wisconsin, at Michigan State, whatever, you can't expect to do anything. But that's not to say there's not room to change. There's plenty of basketball left to be played. I think there's 13 or 14 Big Ten games left. Um, so there is time to turn things around, but that's only going to happen if something switches on the cultural side of things from a team-wide thing, not just a player, as we've talked about. It has to be a team-wide change. So as we wrap this up, Austin, final airing of grievances following the Illinois loss.
I'm sad. Like it is legitimately sad that like IU basketball, like I know their next game's Friday, like I'll still know the schedule like the back of my hand, but now it's like, all right, when do the IU women play next? Like that's a team that legitimately they do little things right. They play as a team. They had that awesome win against Iowa over the weekend. I know you were there. That kind of I hope made the trip worthwhile out to Iowa City because that cannot be a fun drive, especially in the cold. But like that's where we are right now. That's where the fans are. People are literally looking up when the next Indiana football spring practice is because that's where they are in their, IU football athletics. That's the hierarchy. It's football one, everything else comes below it, and men's basketball is somewhere there in the middle. But it's like, can we wait? When is baseball season? When is the weather going to change? Like it being cold outside and the team not playing well, it just coincide with not having a fun time on campus. So I'm still going to root for the team every single game. That'll never change. That'll never ever change. But it's sad to see that other people that us just like it's not in the forefront of our minds, and it's just the level of respect we have for this program has completely dropped off. It really in 2 years, honestly, because Indiana was on the up and up with Trace Jackson Davis, and you had the right steps in place to continue building that and getting this program back to what it was, and it's just gone completely downhill. And you're right, we're in the basement right now in terms of where IU basketball is, and we've seen some bad years the last decade or so, really since the turn of the century, but. This is about as low as it gets, especially when you get guys getting ejected from games for trying to stick up for teammates. That's as low as it gets, in my opinion.
I'm with you. I'm going to continue to watch every game. There's plenty of game left. But again, it is just disappointing. It's sad. It's frustrating to see the team that I don't even care about the money. It's a team that is Indiana basketball. It's a prime time program. It's, the debates always continue, but to me, it's a blue blood of college basketball. And to see that this program is in this state at this time, in this age of college athletics, it frankly is quite disappointing. Will I still be watching all the games? Yes. Will I be hoping that it gets better? Yes. Do I think they have the pieces to make it better? At least player wise, I do. We've seen the coaching staff show to be very stubborn throughout the years and not changing in their ways. But do I think it can happen? I do. Do I hope it can happen? I do. But the only thing that will tell is time. So will I be watching? Yes, and I'm hoping that it turns around, and especially these next two games on the road in Ohio State and Northwestern, they could be big turning points for the season, like you said, Austin. And time will only tell what will happen with this Indiana basketball team. So that was a longer episode of House of Hoosier as we honored the celebration of Festivus a little bit after, a little bit under a month past when it was. And I think it was necessary to establish where this program's at, identify the problems, and at least map out what could be a potential future for this program and see what the underlying reasons were. So Indiana is 12 or 13-5 on the year. They'll play Ohio State Friday at 8 p.m. on Fox. That's a national game. And then Northwestern the Wednesday after that, the 22nd, on Big Ten Network at 7 p.m. Eastern. So for Austin, I'm Ian. I'm sure many of you listening have aired your grievances already. I hope you enjoyed our grievances that we aired, and hopefully the feats of strength will come soon enough. So for Austin, I'm Ian. That's another episode.